The Brew House was created to capture and share with you the long history of the Genesee Brewery, but the brewery itself isn't half as interesting as the beer and the people who make it. Visit GeneseeBrewhouse.com.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Rochester Press Box, brought to you by the Genesee Brew House. I am Dave Yates, and joining us this week we have from WHAM TV and Pickin Matt Trabold, and also with us Mike Catalana.
Good to
and
be
as
back.
Always, Pat Duffy. Pat, what are we wearing today?
Well, in honor of the tournament, Temple, the second team out this year, but Rochester's own Quentin Rose, thought I represent. Plus, I'm a big Palestra guy, arguably the most important arena in American sports. So, you know.
I don't want to be topper guy. I mean, I grew up going to the Palestra. I love the Palestra.
My wife went to Penn. Top that. There you go.
Oh. I've been to Penn before.
Yeah.
I can spell Penn.
I don't believe that or that.
She is smarter than we are.
Yes. All of us. Goodbye.
Well, yeah, well, not that smart.
All right, on that note, let's talk about the tournament, what we got going on, and some of the teams that are going in right now, Syracuse, UB. What do you see the brackets break it down as?
So Syracuse, I think them and UB got a pretty good initial draw. I mean, Syracuse, Baylor is a team that is without their best guy in terms of points, rebounds, block shots, Tristan Clark. He's not there. That's a big deal because without him, Flo Thamba and company up front for Baylor, they do not have a lot. They're going to make guys like Pascal Chukwu look like an offensive maestro, which for many games this year, he has not looked as such. They don't shoot the three well outside the top 200. That is going to be great for the Orange Blanket defense. I liked them in that first game. I think they'll have some success against that. UB, I know they're playing the first four game, but they got a great draw as well. Whether it's going to be Arizona State, St. John's, I think that's a great draw because those are very backcourt-based teams. And what I think UB does better than maybe any team in the country is backcourt defense, on-ball defense, suffocating, getting the other way, and transition scoring. It's Dante Carruthers. You mentioned a Bishop Kearney guy. Dante Carruthers, East High, unbelievable defensively, steals and the like. Devontae Jordan is also a very good defensive guy for them. I like their first draws, but in that second game, it might be a little bit more difficult.
This is when we can like college basketball, right?
Yeah.
Watch me get him all fired up here.
All season long.
All season long, I talk about some things that are just lacking. But what's not lacking in the tournament is the competition and the one and done in every game, which makes it. That is what makes it so different. It's closest to the NFL that way, right? You get one game and you advance or you don't. And now the fact that Matt and I have talked about this a lot, where when we used to look at the brackets and 5-12, remember that was the big upset. Now you don't seem all that fazed if a 14 wins or if a 12 or a 13. Yeah, like we see how close these teams really are. Now that being said, this tournament might be a little more top-heavy because those ACC teams have been so good during the year. And if it ends up as the ones and the twos, so be it. But I think the idea of these few weeks and knowing that legitimately there are teams in that lower bracket that maybe can't win 6 games, but they can beat almost anybody, I think, is what makes it great.
Well, it's so funny you bring up the one and done. Tuesday night, the playing game was at Prairie View and Fairleigh Dickinson.
Right.
No pull. I'm just watching the game to see what. By the end of the game, I'm literally on the edge of my bed. I got both my hands on my shoulder.
You're right. You're right. It's what makes it fun. It's what I say about the baseball playoffs. When they talk about that one game thing and, in the wild card, if you're a fan of that team, you are panicked in that game. But to everybody else, it brings them in. And that's with the NCAA tournament. Every game the loser is done.
And as a Pirates fan, I can definitely attest to that because they play in it almost every year and they don't usually do well.
Well, it's different too because it makes you be a baseball fan again. It's kind of fun to watch a game and not have a vested interest in it and just sit back and enjoy the game.
Well, because you're not a Fairleigh Dickinson fan.
Well, I'm fairly a Dickinson fan.
Oh, well played.
Thank you. No, but I do have a bad habit of getting too invested in teams that I don't care about, right?
Yeah.
Like I have a tradition every year of going out with a buddy the first weekend and just drinking our faces off and watching all the games throughout the day. And I will, in every game, decide I'm going to follow this team. And again, by the end of the game, I'm screaming at the television. I'm like making obscene gestures at people that were cheering for the other team.
And all of a sudden all their players.
Absolutely.
You're mad at the coach,
but
questioning strategy.
Every single beer, I'm a little bit better when it comes to what defense they should be running at that moment.
We're back with more of the Rochester Press Box right after this, brought to you by the Genesee Brew House.
The Press Box is brought to you in part by Bay & Goodman Pizza, a local Rochester favorite. Corner of North Winton and Browncroft, Bay & Goodman Pizza.
Hello and welcome back to the Rochester Press Box, brought to you by the Genesee Brew House. I am Dave Yates, and we are talking March Madness in the first segment. Now let's talk a little bit about the NFL draft coming up, the Buffalo Bills. They've got a lot of additions, but what do we got coming up?
I don't think anything changes for them in the draft. Everybody talks about best player available. I still think they're in a position to do that. I like, in theory, what they've done. I like some of the players, what they've done in free agency. But I don't think, outside of maybe Morris at center, I don't think any of those guys are long-term solutions. And then by long-term in the NFL, you're talking about, 5 years? Mm-hmm. So in terms of the draft, I don't think it changes anything. I've thought all along they're going to go defensive line in the first round because there is a need there. Plus, that's where this draft is deep. So everybody talks about Ed Oliver, players like that. Let's see how it all maps out. I'm still in the belief that somebody could be trying to trade up at that point, and they may look at that. But I still think what they've done so far has been really good. The next step is still to take the best player available because this roster still needs a lot of work.
Okay, two problems with everything you're saying. Everything you said was dumb. First of all, there's no way to take best player available. We've talked about this before because you don't know who the best player available is until 3 years after the draft is over.
Okay.
So it's not the best player available. No, it is a valid argument.
That's not a valid argument.
Second, how do you say that it's a deep D-tackle draft and they go take a D-tackle at 9? If it's a deep draft, you take the bigger need, which is wide receiver for this football team.
That's how you get yourself in trouble.
No, it's a deep draft. There's a whole bunch of them. Okay, so I'm going to take this guy right here, even though there's like 10 guys back here.
There may be 4 D tackles or defensive linemen taken by the time the Bills go at number 9.
Okay, but is D tackle that much of a need for you right now? You addressed it pretty high in the draft last season with Harrison Phillips. You've got some guys. What?
Harrison Phillips, okay.
What about him? What?
Nice rotation player that hopefully can become a every down player in the NFL.
Okay, so
not exactly like a dominant D lineman.
Okay, so what makes more of an impact on you? A guy as a D lineman who you will be rotating in, even if it is a superstar D lineman, or a wide receiver who you need a number 1 wide receiver who could make a physical impact for your piece that you drafted.
The D lineman is more important.
You're kidding me. Rookie quarterback. Yeah, why get hit pieces? God, why do I talk to you?
Matt, what do you think?
So you mentioned Ed Oliver. I think another guy that might drop did not have a great combine, Christian Wilkins. I know that's one of those needs out there. You guys are going back and forth about it. But wide receiver, hey, N'Keal Harry's a guy throughout the season. It looked like he'd be a first-round pick. If he falls to the second round, he's an aerial threat. They got some pretty good additions in the wideouts recently with Cole Beasley, with John Brown, but they're not really aerial. They're not taller. They're not jumpers. I think if N'Keal Harry is there, they can have both of those guys that you're talking about, both of those positions filled, wideout and defensive end in those first 2 days. I think there's some good value at both those positions. I'm just trying to help you guys out.
He's
the mediator.
He's scared of you. We know this. There's a reason he would side with you.
He's not scared of anybody.
Oh, no, I side with that's a side for both. I took both sides.
This kind of creates, you think about it. The NFL draft is exactly what the NFL has always wanted. It keeps you talking about this league year round.
They do that with everything.
It's amazing, though.
They are so good at it. They are better at it than, though the NBA is getting better at it, they're creating a little drama, constant talk about the league. There's nothing like the NFL. And the biggest difference is because everybody feels like, to some extent, they've got a shot. That we're only a couple of players away. We got our quarterback, whatever it is. I think the Bills are in that position now.
No, but they legitimately are for the first time in a long time. Where you hit on 2 of your top 4 draft picks here, you're good. You're golden. The problem that you're going to have walking into this season is the additions you made in free agency, because you made a lot of, like Mike said, short-term solution guys that could step up and be big for you. But I don't think there's going to be an in-between. I think either they're going to bust out of the shell that they have, your Beasleys, your Browns, things like that, and go, whoa, how do we get the value for them? Or they're going to shrink and disappear like Percy Harvin did, not Vontae Davis so much so.
Yeah.
It's going to be feast or famine. There'll be nothing in the middle unless you draft a receiver at 9.
There you go. All right. We're back with more of the Rochester Press Box right after this.
Here's the Press Box trivia question brought to you by Market View Liquor. where exceptional customer service meets an extensive selection. Jefferson Road at 390.
Today is all about belief. Right? It's not enough for me to believe it. It's not enough for Coach Hill or Coach Barsham to believe it. You have to be the ones that believe that you are capable of running the way that we all know you are capable of, and that those negative thoughts that are coming into your head, you can acknowledge and push away. What's your response to them going to be? 5 more meters, 5 more meters, 5 more meters.
Here's the Press Box Trivia answer, brought to you by Market View Liquor, where exceptional customer service meets an extensive selection. Jefferson Road at 390.
Hello and welcome back to the Rochester Press Box, brought to you by the Genesee Brew House. I am Dave Yates. It is time now for Like It or Not. Matt, let's start with you. Let's talk about a guy who's coming off a state championship in high school, now going to Syracuse. What kind of an impact will that young man have for the Orange?
So Joe Girard, obviously an unbelievable jump shooter. That is undeniable, that skill. And then an AAU ball, doesn't have to do it a lot at Glens Falls, but he's a very good passer. I'm not sure if he'll have that role with the Orange, but he has at least to fall back on in a pinch. Athleticism is always going to come up with him. That'll be the big topic, especially with that zone defense and how he can get out and move laterally and all that kind of stuff and that kind of speed. I remember being at the Batavia Glens Falls game, football-wise, at the Carrier Dome, being blown away at his athleticism. Now, granted, football athleticism a little bit different than basketball, I should say, but I think generally he's underrated athletically. We'll see if he can be a star. I still think he can at least be a producer, a rotational guy, maybe a starter at some point. I think he'll definitely put a stamp on his Syracuse career at some point. He has skills that are just too good to not do as such. Now, I think there's a matter of 4 inches of height that will make Buddy Boeheim have a better career. They're sort of the same repertoire, but I still think Joe Girard is going to have his time.
It's interesting with Boeheim, with Buddy Boeheim, because Syracuse has not really recruited players like Buddy, that you thought, well, they don't have the athleticism to play the zone. And, you know, the story is that Jim Boeheim had to be sort of convinced to recruit his own son because other coaches were saying the kid can play. If you can shoot in college basketball, there's a place for you on the roster, right? Buddy can shoot. We know Joe Girard can shoot. Why do we want to beat down these guys before they've even stepped on the court? He's been highly successful. He's a clutch player. He's carried a team. Let's see how he does at the next level. It may not be immediate, but I think that guy has shown that he can play at a high level.
Well, when the only reason you've been successful is a defense that you can only run the right way and confuses everybody else and you can't run that defense, maybe that's why you wait a little while and pump the brakes on a Buddy Baker or a Girard. Just saying. It's his whole bread and butter. He runs the zone. If you can't run the zone, what's the point of being there?
What I'm saying is Buddy has shown the ability to play on this team.
Okay.
And the ability to contribute.
You're going to strike, lightning going to strike twice? Buddy?
Yes.
I feel like they were just afraid of letting him get out of their backyard and how bad that was going to look.
Yeah, well, especially because I think regardless of where he went, he was going to have an impact, and I can just imagine that. I bet Cornell-Syracuse game, Jimmy Boeheim is going to really hurt him one of these years.
Yeah, the other side.
Let's talk about Mike Trout. Let's talk about his contract.
Look, and Mike Trout's the best player in baseball. The shame of it is people just really don't know. Honestly, and I'll say this being a little provincial, I think more people see Mike Trout sitting in the end zone at an Eagles game where they're handing him footballs than they do in baseball. But it's an amazing game. The reason Mike Trout can make all this money, the local TV money is insane for all these teams, and the Angels have a great deal. And for them, it makes good financial sense to pay a guy $400 million. The shame of it is he's not a bigger star. He should be, right? Just based on the way he plays, sort of an all-American kid, does everything well. He's a quiet guy. He doesn't seek out the attention. But even that being said, even a guy like Bryce Harper who does do more of that still isn't anywhere near the kind of star guys are certainly in basketball and football. So I don't know if baseball will have it, but if anybody's going to get paid the crazy amount, I'm glad it's Mike Trout.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I think it's more of him being a quiet person than where he plays. That's the problem, right? Like, if he made some noise and made some attention for himself, you would get coverage on the West Coast for Mike Trout. I think what hurts him more than Los Angeles and what hurts him more than playing on a team that hasn't won a playoff game since he's been there is the fact that he won't seek out the attention.
Yeah.
And if I were the Angels, I think part of signing this $430 million contract would be, hey, you say words now. You go make noise, and you do things, and you make people look over here because you're being paid $500 million.
My problem with it is that you see these contracts for just an exorbitant amount of years with one team, whether it be Ilya Kovalchuk and that weirdness. Albert Pujols had one pretty recently with the Angels, and it really didn't pan out. He did not stay relevant throughout it. Now, I think Mike Trout might be able to buck that trend, but still, I don't like those kind of contracts.
Too much long term. Well, believe it or not, even after all that, we still have some unfinished business to take care of right after this on the Rochester Press Box.
And now here's this week's MVP Experience Stat of the Week, brought to you by Sport Clips, where it's good to be a guy. No appointment ever needed.
And now to Eichel. He floated one. Get 2 for 2 egg and cheese wraps, 2 for 4 bagels with cream cheese spread, and 2 for 5 bacon, egg, and cheese croissants with Dunkin' Go-Tos. America runs on Dunkin'.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Rochester Press Box, brought to you by the Genesee Brew House. I am Dave Yates. It is time now for Unfinished Business, brought to you by Dunkin'. America runs on Dunkin'. And, sir, we will start with you talking.
One thing I hate more than anything in the world is hypocrisy, especially old guy to young guy hypocrisy. Carlos Santana, now with Cleveland, formerly of the Philadelphia Phillies, tells a story earlier this week about how he walks into the clubhouse towards the end of the season when the Phillies are out of the playoffs and sees a bunch of young players during the game playing their video game Fortnite on the clubhouse television. He takes a baseball bat and he smashes the television to send a message. We are professionals here. We take our job seriously. And all of a sudden, out of the woodwork, you see all these old baseball guys, all these old guys in general on the internet. Good. That's a way to take care of the younger generation who doesn't appreciate what they have on a baseball field. Take your job seriously, says people who cheered on the '86 Mets, who were doing a bunch of cocaine and being super drunk all the time. Says guys who cheered on Jim Leland and his teams who were burning heaters in the hallway while the game is going on. Listen to me. You want to be upset about kids playing video games and being distracted during a baseball game? I'm fine with that. But let's not sit here and pretend that Pete Rose and people like that weren't doing other things inside clubhouses. In fact, we've heard stories of things that I can't even tell you were going on in clubhouses during games. All right? Every generation is like this. There's always something. And you know what? I think video games a little more healthy than a big pile of cocaine.
Wow.
Fair statement?
I'd say so.
Yeah, if you're going to frame it that way, yes,
Thank you.
I'm with you on that.
It's all relative. Tough act to follow. You get to do that.
Not really, but go ahead.
With me, it's always going to be college basketball for the most part. So for my money, Philadelphia is the top basketball city in the world, especially for college basketball with all the relevant teams they have there. This week you had two icons of Philadelphia basketball and college basketball as a whole in Phil Martelli with his firing at St. Joe's, and then with the Temple icon in Fran Dunphy in his final year coming to an end in the NCAA tournament in his retirement. Now, going to St. Joe's Hawks and Phil Martelli, I think they did him a little bit dirty. This is a guy that spent 34 years, very successful for the most part there, but they gave him only 3 paragraphs in a public statement with typos in it, no less. Yes, I realize the last 3 years of that 34 years were not very good, but he had to deal with all sorts of injuries. We're talking about Lamar Kimball, Shavar Newkirk, Pierre Francesco Oliva. These are big guys for that team. They were not there. He deserved better. College basketball world's going to miss you, Phil.
Yeah, bad way they handled it for both coaches, really, and it ended up being a bad thing. All right, I want to talk about the way to handle things and not to handle things, but how the result may make that irrelevant. I'm talking about the way Brandon Beane has handled his offseason and the way Dave Gettleman has handled his offseason too. Beane has a plan. We know what it is, and he's mapping it out, and he's trying to fill some holes, and now he's going to draft. But we know mostly what it's going to come down to. It's going to come down to how well Josh Allen plays and can Sean McDermott adapt and can the Bills win. So all these great plans and this great way of laying out the salary cap is wonderful, but if your quarterback can't play or doesn't play well, you're not going to have the success that you want. And then you look at Gettleman. I have no idea what he's doing. He got rid of Odell Beckham Jr. Okay, you can make that football argument if you want, but none of that's going to matter until he does the right thing with the quarterback. And he's sticking with Eli, at least for now. Now, the thought is, at some point, Gettleman's got a plan with the Giants. It may end up like the Browns, where you mess it up, you mess it up, you mess it up, and then you get Baker, and maybe he makes everything right. At the moment, everything looks good for what the Bills are doing and bad with the Giants, but it's going to come down to the guy behind center. Right now, I'll take Josh Allen over Eli Manning, but obviously, Eli Manning is not the end game for the Giants. We just don't know what Gettleman's end game actually is.
Maybe he doesn't know.
Not yet.
All right, thanks everybody for joining us on the Rochester Press Box, brought to you by the Genesee Brew House. Gentlemen, thanks for being here.
You're
Always
welcome.
a pleasure.
Thank you.
See you next week.